Once again, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to report my experiences from this priority setting partnership, which was conducted in Canada, and the Canadians were the first who engaged patients to define research priorities. Just to give you some background, traditionally researchers were not much interested what patients were interested. Researchers, they research on what they are personally interested, what is a hot topic. Imaging is a hot topic, and for what you get the biggest funding. This is one interest of researchers. And even if the researchers address questions of importance to the patients, they often fail to provide some answers that are useful in practice. Though there's a gap between what is of interest for patients, their caregivers, and the researchers. And to close this gap, the British have founded the James Lind Alliance. James Lind was a British surgeon in the 18th century who was a father of evidence-based medicine. And the James Lind Alliance is supported by the British National Institute of Health Research. And their idea is to bring clinicians, patients, and carers together to discuss research priorities and to recommend to the public funders that future research fundings should take into consideration these research priorities. And if you have a look on the website of the James Lind Alliance, you see there are a lot of diseases where there have been these research priority meetings from cancer, asthma, or even eating disorders. Most of them have been conducted in Great Britain, but also some in Canada or in the Netherlands. So in Canada, there's also a national Institute of Health. It's called the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. And this Canadian Institute has several sub-institutes. And one of these institutes is the Institute of Musculoskeletal Health and Arthritis is a director. And this institute decided to invite the James Lind Alliance, because they have experience with this process, to engage patients and caregivers to define research priorities, to do this for the Canadian Institute of Musculoskeletal Health and Arthritis for fibromyalgia. Although this institute, they defined some research priorities, and one was in this musculoskeletal disease to promote innovative research and as well integration of research into the practice. And chronic pain and fatigue is one major topic in this research area, and research should be promoted which aims to better understand the causes and manifestation of chronic pain and fatigue, and to develop optimal strategies of care and management through improved models of care. So that is to say, this was a joint venture of the James Lind Alliance together with the Canadian Institute of Health, with a special institute on musculoskeletal health. And you see the results of this priority setting ship are available online on the homepage of the GLA. So again, this was the objectives of this Adult Fibromyalgia Priority Setting Partnership, PSP, to engage patients, caregivers, and clinicians in a priority setting exercise that would identify the scope of uncertainties in the management of adult fibromyalgia, and to build a prioritized list of those uncertainties for research and to publish these results, that future research funding bodies should consider it in their decisions of funding. So this is a very structured process. I was very impressed how well it was organized by the James Lind Alliance. There was a 12-person steering committee composed by clinical experts, family physician, rheumatologist, psychologist, somebody who was not engaged in fibromyalgia, and a scientific director, and also 5 patients with fibromyalgia was in the steering committee. I was included as an external expert, and there was some staff of the Canadian Musculoskeletal Institute which provided data analysis. So there were 15 telephone conferences, and my first experience is Canada is a big country, and it's not easy to arrange telephone conferences where also the East and West Coast can participate. And for us Europeans, it meant that I participated at 9:30 p.m. to this telephone conferences. It was because I'm an early bird. This was very hard exercise for me. One task of the steering committee was to develop a national survey. This has to be Canada, to be in English and French, and I validated the French translation with our French patients. Remember, I live near the French border. And the questionnaire comprised 16 questions and also some demographic data, and the questionnaire was also online. It was distributed by partner organizations, social media, and societies, and 17 organizations participated in this survey, where patients, their relatives, and caregivers were asked, what are the main questions you have, which questions should be addressed by research. So, and then all these responses were gathered. You see, there were around 3,000 responses, narratives. You see, most questions were on pharmacological treatment. Next were on alternative and complementary treatment, lifestyle. Some of them were removed because they were out of the scope of the question, because the question was on understanding mechanism and improving healthcare. And those questions in the scope were grouped into some questions in a series of 43 indicative questions. So next step was to see which of these questions have been still answered by research. Therefore, all up-to-date Cochrane reviews were checked. You see, there were 119 reviews. You can imagine it was a hell lot of work. Were also compared to recent guidelines and expert consents. So in short, these 43 questions were condensed to 25 questions. So some of these questions have been answered by research. So this is a file. There were 550 respondents with around 4,500 questions, and this is a process of prioritization. So then there was a workshop, like you have a workshop, but it was a 2-day workshop in May 2016, and a second personal experience. I was very happy for my Raynaud syndrome that it was postponed from February to May, because they had in February minus 30 degrees Celsius, which might be also challenging for Norwegian, I think. So this was a 1-day workshop, and it was facilitated by the JLA consultant. And there were 3 rounds of discussions. So I'll show you. This is Montreal, where the workshop took place. Very beautiful city, and see the weather was really European spring. And this was the hotel where the conference took place. So there were 3 groups, and each group was comprised equally by patients and clinicians, 6 in each group. And there were 3 rounds of discussions just to prioritize again and again. You see, it was a very complicated process. you can read it in detail if you're interested in the publication. So finally, we came to this ranking, and so my personal experiences were, first, the patients who attended the workshop were extremely well educated. They knew a lot, sometimes a lot more than the clinicians about the disease. There was the atmosphere was very friendly and of mutual respect. Sometimes more in English, sometimes in French language. And the results could have been very different because every of these 3 working groups came to a different ranking, though this was a type of a compromise. Though these are the top 5 research priorities defined by this group of patients and clinicians. So the first is on targeted and personalized treatments, and you see we are very happy that we could report on our ideas on what is a targeted or personal treatment and subgrouping in fibromyalgia. Second topic is on lifestyle interventions. That is to say, what can the patient do by themselves to feel better? Might it be nutrition? Might it be pacing, taking more breaks, general lifestyle intervention? Third highly ranked topic was managing sleep problems. Then educated patients, this is called self-empowerment, to take over active role in their care. And fifth question, what are optimal care pathways for Canada for the patient? This was your question, which specialty should treat patients with fibromyalgia. So next were about self-management strategies, including social media and online tools. I think this is a question for the future, especially in big countries where for some patients it's very far to some specialty center. Top 7 was how to manage cognitive symptoms, concentration problems, the so-called fibrofog. Interestingly, cannabinoids, and you know, cannabis is very popular in Canada, medical cannabis as a treatment, and opioids only reached rank 8. 9 was improving health literacy, and to my opinion, I would have ranked it higher. What are effective treatments for hypersensitivity? I think we know some of the drugs can reduce pain, hypersensitivity, but we really don't know if it works also for noise, odor, and light. So this is a final photo of the working group. This is a head of the steering committee, Marianne Fitzcharles, who guided the steering group. You see, everybody was loving the atmosphere, was really friendly, and everybody was also glad after this very exhausting process was over. So these priorities were first time published and announced in a Canadian Pain Research Summit, which took place in September 2016. This is here announced, and on this date it was published on the website on the Canadian Institute of Health Research. And so we're talking about 15 million euros of funding. It's quite a lot of money. And everybody can apply. It's not only about fibromyalgia. The major topics are pain and fatigue, but this is fibromyalgia. And the paper has now been published, is online available, free of cost, via PubMed in the Canadian Journal of Pain. You can see the details of the process and again the top 10 research priorities. So the open question is how this will influence funding. So I searched the internet of the James Lind Alliance if there have been one publication on the other diseases, if it had some impact. I didn't know, I didn't find any data, but I have very good connections with the Canadians, and I hope in 2 years I can give you an answer if it has boosted fibromyalgia research in Canada. So just to summarize, the involvement of patients and caregivers in defining research priorities is overdue, and I'm curious how you will manage it in Norway. If you want a partner, the JLA is available. They have a really highly structured process. And if it has an effect of priority setting, needs to be determined. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting, and I'm very excited to see about the funding. That's always important for us. Is there any questions? No.
So, but I have a question on your organizations. How do you engage in research priorities? Do you do anything in this area?
Anyone that feels to answer that?
No, because
actually, over the last 5 years now, there has been quite a change. In most funders now require patient engagement in research. So that could be to define the topic or question for research, and also involvement in the whole research process. But as far as I know, there has been very few attempts to systematically prioritize the research questions here.
I think the European League Against Rheumatism, they also have some teaching materials for patients how to engage in research and also how to engage in clinical studies. So new clinical studies sometimes require the involvement of patients, even in the development of the study design and in the interpretation of the data. And I think this could also be a chance for you for the new Norwegian self-help organizations to gather this material and to engage more, because you have the rights. You only have to grasp the opportunity to do so.
Yeah. So actually, we have now implemented patient partnership in most of our research, and obviously it's useful, and funders require it when we apply for funding.
Okay. You can also say that.
Question.
Oh, now it's questions. Perfect. There's one up there.
Actually, it's more a comment. Last year, the Norwegian Research Council launched a program for chronic fatigue syndrome, research program, and then the patients were invited to make the priorities for this research. So I don't think that the association, the Fibromyalgia Association, has done something similar, but it might be, and it has been a very pressure from the patient organization to do that for the and Norwegian Research Council is on our top.
Thank you.
There's one question down here also.
Yes, I just wanted to say that we have to remember the history of this disease, because it has been a woman disease and it has not been that important. We have been like hysterical or psychological problems, and I mean it's not been interesting to investigate in. So I think, and it has to be also now many different researchers from different environments has to come together because it is so complex. You can't just take one piece of it because it's really complex.
Yeah. So if you really want to change something, either as a researcher or clinician or patient, you have to look and to check what are current mainstream tendencies, and if there's someone you can serve on it. And this is, you mentioned other important one, it's gender medicine. So if you get some funding, this can be for gender, because it's politically correct. And it's good that it's politically correct, but you must again grasp the chance if you want to have some funding, and you can try it via gender medicine. And another one is shared decision making, or the involvement of patients.
It's not a question, but I'll just remind you and the audience, it's the Norwegian Research Council that's funding this seminar, and it's a very great interest for fibromyalgia in the Research Council, and also in or from the Norwegian health authorities, which they have funding both fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, with lots more than it used to be some years ago. So it's also for education and having seminars like this. And I think it's very important to include the Users Association, and I think we have a good relation. So that will continue. So there's lots of research questions to be addressed. So yes, that's just a comment.
So I would like to ask another question to the patient representatives. How do you agree with this top 10 priorities defined by the Canadians? Is there another topic you would be more interested in than these 10s you saw?
I think they did pretty good work in what they have done, Ella, what you have done. Because one really important thing for us, which have fibromyalgia, is for the first that we are that they believe in us when we say which problems we have, and the second is very many of us go, for example, to a doctor, and the doctor is telling them, it's no problem. You are depressed. You need some lucky pills, and everything will be fine. And in many ways, this has been the biggest enemy for everybody in Norway, and also I think in Germany, which have fibromyalgia, because there are so many doctors which believe fibromyalgia is not existing. These people, they are only depressed. And this have been and still is the biggest challenge we have in Norway. Because I know we have some years ago had a meeting with the German Fibromyalgia League. And in Germany they are called pension hunters, because they just wish to go to get money. And we have had a little bit of it in Norway too, not so much as in Germany maybe. But the biggest problem is there are still so many doctors around in Norway which tell their patients also today fibromyalgia is not existing. You need some lucky pills and everything will be fine. That is our biggest challenge today. And I'm glad that I can say it to everybody of you, fibromyalgia is actually existing. Please notice. Thank you.
So we also discussed other point on research priorities. It's on educating physicians. No? Educating physicians that fibromyalgia exists, but interestingly, it does not appear on the top 10.
So that's what we have started to do here today.
Yeah, that's it.
So hope we're going to continue this after this.